Hi, it's Katrina. There is a lot going on today. Energy contained in unexpected places, secret techniques to protect yourself from poison, and amazing weapons you're not going to want to miss. Today is all about amazing technology from the ancient world, so if that sounds good, be sure to subscribe and let's go. The Energy Towers of Peru. Prepare to be blown away by the oldest solar observatory in the Americas. This place is ancient, built more than 2,200 years ago in Peru. The ruin of Chanquillo is home to 13 energy towers of unparalleled technological prowess. The 13 towers were built upon a ridge around 250 BC. The towers were used to track the rising and setting arcs of the sun so that the Chasma culture could predict equinoxes and solstices. These towers worked like one huge clock, keeping track of the precise time of year to within a day. To make the towers even more impressive, they were built within a triple-walled hilltop complex. That's 3 walls of protection, making the complex more like a fortified temple. Sadly, there isn't much to see today because the towers lie in ruins. Check out this image. It shows the 13 towers stretched along the ridge in the ruins of the complex. They look sort of like spines on the back of some huge dead dinosaur buried in the sand. Still, it's impossible to ignore the sophisticated understanding of the stars that went into building the towers. Ivan Gezi, the local director at Chanquillo, said this is the only observatory from the ancient world that was used as a complete solar calendar. This is from the guy who's been studying the site for 2 decades. Don't go anywhere yet because Peru has more amazing towers I want to tell you about. 13,000 feet above sea level near the shores of Lake Titicaca are perplexing stone towers known as chulpa. Unlike the towers at Chanquillo, these ones still stand. Each giant chulpa is made of blocks that fit together so perfectly you'd have a tough time wedging the thinnest piece of paper between them. The craziest part, though, is that archaeologists aren't entirely sure what they were used for. Some think they were funeral structures, but that could be wrong. There's little information on who made the towers or how old they are. Some have suggested the Inca built the chulpa in the 15th century, but they look older than that. There was no clay or mortar or cement of any kind used to build the towers. Still, they stand just as strong as any modern structure built with steel rebar and a concrete foundation. The towers appear to have been constructed over Earth's energy lines. A group of dowsers visited the chulpa in 2013. Dowsers are people who use a rod walking around to look for water and minerals under the earth. They used metal rods to map very subtle energy flows running right through the cores of the towers. This is natural energy, power that comes straight from the earth. It's a phenomenon people have known about for thousands and thousands of years. In fact, there's a powerful band of energy that flows across Peru known as the Path of Viracocha. It moves through Machu Picchu to Cusco and through other megalithic sites. It's possible the mysterious chulpa towers, which appear to serve absolutely no purpose, were used to focus the natural energy of the Path of Viracocha. But to what end? The solar temple of Niuser. These are the purification bowls found at Niuser's Sun Temple. There are at least 9 huge alabaster basins, each one roughly 4 feet in diameter. Nobody knows what they were used for, only that they may have once been filled with blood. Let's back up a little bit. Niuser's Sun Temple is one of the most mysterious structures in all of Egypt. It's one of few sun temples that have been found in modern times. Most of them are still lost, and even the ones that have been discovered are in a poor state of ruin. Based on ancient texts, Egyptologists suspect the temple was built in the 5th dynasty by King Niuserra. He was one of the most productive builders of the Old Kingdom. Niuser built a series of funerary monuments for his father, King Nefertari, but also for his mother, Khentkaus II, and his brother. The Sun Temple was the pinnacle of all Niuserra's building projects. There was a main temple, which gave way to a corridor that led to a walled courtyard. At the back of the courtyard loomed a massive obelisk with an altar in front of it. The obelisk was made of pure limestone and stood almost 120 feet tall. It took up nearly the entire courtyard, with its base made of red granite. This would have been a striking thing to see, the red foundation against the alabaster altar and the limestone obelisk. Scientists are at a loss for what the point of the Sun Temple was. They think the purification bowls may have been filled with blood from victims of ritual sacrifice. The altar in front of the obelisk must have been used for something, but it's unclear what. Perhaps it was a symbol of the sun, who knows? The obelisk itself was so large, it was like a tower that blocked out the sun. I do have one possible explanation I'd like to share with you. What if the ancient sun temples of Egypt were just like the Chulpa towers in Peru? Perhaps these Egyptian obelisks captured natural energy from the planet and focused it, becoming some sort of energy conductor. Do you think it's possible? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Ancient grenades. Archaeologists recently found evidence of people using grenades in the battle at the Great Wall of China. These were real grenades that used gunpowder to blow people up. Researchers call them stone grenades, the most brutal and primitive grenade that has ever been flung at an enemy. The researchers excavated an ancient building at a section of the Great Wall of China known as the Badaling section. It's about 50 miles from Beijing, considered the most visited part of the wall. When you see pictures of the breathtaking wall stretching majestically over the hilly countryside, they are almost always taken near Beijing. The Great Wall is older than a lot of people realize. Some sections of it date to before Alexander the Great was born. They go back to the 7th century BC, to around the time the Hebrew Bible was written. Then, in the 3rd century BC, first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, connected several existing walls into a single system. The first emperor was the one who unified China under his iron fist. It made sense that he unified individual walls, towers, and garrisons into a gigantic blockade against invasion. Construction continued for another 1,000 years. Pieces of the Great Wall of China continued to be maintained and improved throughout the Ming Dynasty, right until 1644. The Badaling section comes from the most recent period, less than 500 years ago. The parts that are older are in shambles and poorly kept. During the excavation at the Badaling section, archaeologists uncovered 59 stone grenades. They were discovered inside a ruined warehouse that was used specifically for storing weapons. Shang Heng, the archaeologist who made the discovery, said it was the first time such a storehouse was found along the Great Wall. This was big archaeology news in China. But just what in the world is a stone grenade? Is this even advanced technology? Hundreds of these grenades have been found throughout China, usually close to the Great Wall. Nobody knows exactly when they were invented, but they had become common weapons by the time of the Ming Dynasty. Guardians of the Great Wall used stone grenades when enemies got too close for comfort. They were dangerously similar to modern grenades and surprisingly simple. A stone grenade is nothing but a hollow rock that's been filled with gunpowder and then sealed. When the gunpowder exploded, the rock shattered, expelling rock shrapnel at anyone in the blast radius. Long before the technology appeared in Europe, the Chinese used explosives. They were the inventors of gunpowder after all. They were using bombs as early as the 9th century during the Song Dynasty. According to Tonio Andrade, a professor of Chinese history at Emory University, soldiers from the Ming Dynasty had more gunpowder weapons than any other power in the world. And now for number 9, but first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big shout-out to Patrick Polite for the super thanks. Thank you so much! If you are new here, be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. The Ancient Library of Pergamum. Pergamum is one of the most important ancient cities that nobody's heard of before. Amazingly, the place is still standing in Turkey, only now it's called Bergama. In the Hellenistic age, this place was home to a superior collection of knowledge. You've heard of the Library of Alexandria, of course. Now it's time to learn about the Library of Pergamum. I'll let you decide which was more impressive. More than 2,000 years ago, King Eumenes II of the Attalid dynasty severed ties with Macedonia and allied with the Roman Republic. This was the start of Pergamum's notoriety. It grew to hold over 200,000 citizens, rivaling other major cities of the ancient world like Alexandria and Antioch. It boasted beautiful sculptures, amazing examples of architecture, and even got a shout-out in the New Testament. In 133 BC, Pergamum was taken over by the Roman Republic. At this time, the city's library was filled to the brim with books, scrolls, and papyrus documents from ancient Egypt. Roman chronicler Pliny the Elder wrote that Pergamum's library was in direct competition with the one in Alexandria. Each library tried to amass the most texts. There was a rivalry between them, each one vying to be the ultimate library in the world. This rivalry reached such a peak that the Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt halted all shipments of papyrus to Pergamum. They were the rulers of Alexandria and were hoping that without papyrus, Pergamum's library couldn't grow anymore. In the end, Pergamum was destroyed by something you might not expect. It was love that brought down one of the greatest libraries the world has ever seen. Mark Antony gifted more than 200,000 volumes housed in Pergamum's library to his lover, Queen Cleopatra. It was supposedly a wedding present. This ended the rivalry because Pergamum didn't have any books left. They were all taken to the Library of Alexandria, which was burned down years later. Nobody's sure when Alexandria's library was destroyed. It could have been in 48 BC at the hands of Julius Caesar, or 270 AD during the attack of Aurelian. It may also have been destroyed thanks to Pope Theophilus when he vowed to destroy all pagan knowledge in the name of the Lord God in 391. The last possibility is that during the Muslim conquest of Egypt in 642, the invaders destroyed the library. No matter who destroyed it, the Library of Alexandria is gone. It burned with the collection of Pergamum's ancient texts on its shelves. Nobody will ever know what kind of technological secrets, cosmological marvels, and historical bombshells were lost forever. The black boxes of the Serapeum. In Egypt, there are some very mysterious large black boxes buried deep underground. Located in Saqqara, they are enormous sarcophagi made from black granite, and they are way too big for humans. The sarcophagi weigh nearly 90,000 pounds each, and were somehow transported into a subterranean complex 2,500 years ago. The sarcophagi are in an ancient mausoleum known as the Serapeum of Saqqara. This was a holy place, a vast underground necropolis where the Apis cult of Memphis buried their sacred bulls. The Apis cult was obsessed with bulls. They believed them to be the incarnations of Ptah, god of all creation and patron deity of craftsmen and architects. The Egyptians were not the only ones obsessed with bulls. The Sumerians had their god Marduk, who was depicted as a bull. In Hinduism, Shiva rides a holy bull named Nandi instead of a horse. For approximately 1,400 years, starting in the 16th century BC, 60 Apis bulls were buried in the Serapeum. It began with individual tombs, isolated and alone. As the years went by, the Apis cult became more important. With more power and influence, they were able to acquire funds for building connected burial chambers within a huge subterranean complex. The complex included shrines, workshops, housing for the workers, and administrative quarters for the priests. The practice of mummifying and burying humongous bulls as if they were kings continued until the start of the Roman period. After the death of Cleopatra, the Apis cult was dismantled. Unfortunately, the Serapeum was vandalized. The burial vaults were broken into with extreme force. Most of the mummified Apis and their opulent burial goods were scavenged. Nobody saw this underground place again until 1850, when it was rediscovered by French scholar Auguste Mariette. More than a century later, scientists are still struggling to understand it. There are 24 sarcophagi that remain within the Great Vaults of the Serapeum. The oldest of them are from 550 BC, during the reign of Pharaoh Amasis II. Most of them are more than 6.5 feet wide, 6.5 feet tall, and 13 feet long. The sheer size of them isn't even the most baffling part. It's the fact they weigh around 40 tons, and that's without their lids. With their lids on, they weigh upwards of 110,000 pounds. It's unknown how the sarcophagi were cut and brought to the Serapeum. Archaeologists think they were moved using rollers and rails and winches. But let's be honest, 110,000 pounds is ridiculous to move through the desert with a primitive roller. Do you think a lost piece of ancient technology was involved? Let me know what you think in the comments below. World's oldest bread. Bread. It's been a staple of the human diet since the first farmers figured out how to transform wheat into something delicious and a little spongy. When they figured out how to mash berries into jelly and grind peanuts into butter, that was the true beginning of human civilization. The issue is that nobody is entirely sure when the first loaf of bread came out of the oven. But thanks to a new discovery in Turkey, archaeologists are getting closer. This is the oldest bakery ever discovered. It dates back 8,600 years, found in the Turkish province of Konya by a group of local scientists. They uncovered adjoining mud brick houses with one of them containing a destroyed oven structure. The ancient oven is massive, clearly once part of an industrial-sized baking operation. Near the oven, archaeologists found trace residue of wheat, pea seeds, barley, and a mysterious spongy residue. Scientific analysis of the spongy residue showed it to be uncooked fermented bread. This tiny chunk of goop must have missed the oven in 6,600 BC. Ali Umut Turkan was the head of excavations. He said the piece of uncooked bread is the only example of it that's ever been found. It miraculously survived all these years with its starches still inside. I should tell you a little bit about where this ancient bakery was found. It was within the archaeological site of Catalhuyuk. Starting around 12,000 years ago in the Neolithic era, Catalhuyuk became one of the first urbanized communities on the planet. And now, here's where things get biblical. 12,000 years ago was allegedly right after the flood was over. You know the flood I'm talking about, the one Noah survived on his ark with 2 of every animal? Christian myth tells us Noah's ark landed on a mountain in Turkey. Noah and his family used pieces of the ark to build the first village, seeing as the rest of the world had been destroyed. In the centuries that followed, Noah's descendants started slowly spreading out, building the first cities on the planet. Or maybe the more accurate thing to say is the first city since the antediluvian nightmare prior to the flood. I know this is only a story to some people, but to others it's a historical fact. Archaeological sites like Catalhuyuk give Noah's story a shocking amount of credibility. This is a city with the first evidence of a bakery in it, and it's right where Noah's family supposedly built the first city. Catalhuyuk is home to other firsts as well. It was where the world's first weavings were discovered, some of the earliest wooden artifacts were found, and it's one of the oldest cities in the world. This seems to be the place where technology began. Advanced technology on the Silk Road. In one of the hottest and driest places in the world, archaeologists have found an advanced irrigation system. This is proof that humans have always found a way to manipulate their environment in order to survive. These archaeologists are from Washington University in St. Louis. They used satellite images and drone reconnaissance to investigate the dry and scorching foothills of China's Tian Shan Mountains. If you're a fan of my desert videos and mountain videos, this is the best of both worlds. Viewed from the ground, there isn't much here in the foothills. Archaeologists have visited the area before and found nothing but random boulders and sandy ditches. But when looking from 90 feet above ground using drones and image analysis software, archaeologists spotted the unmistakable outlines of technology. Having a bird's eye view really does change the game. Doctoral student Yu-Shi Lee said the drones revealed a patchwork of small farming fields, the outlines of irrigation canals, the ruins of a cistern, some dams, and even grave sites. None of this was viewable from ground level. The irrigation system is roughly 1,700 years old, maybe a few decades older. It must have been built by a local herding community to increase crop yield, allowing for maximum cultivation. These weren't scientists. They weren't educated folks who studied at some grand university. They were simple farmers who came up with an ingenious technology to bring water to one of the driest places in China. This area receives less than 3 inches of rainfall a year. Yet with a bit of elbow grease, peasant farmers were able to cultivate millet, wheat, barley, and even grapes. This was all done during the peak of the Silk Road, when new technologies, ideas, and religious beliefs were coming and going from China on foreign trade caravans. The ultimate antidote. Mithridates VI was the immortal king of the kingdom of Pontus from 120 until 63 BC. His people regarded him as their savior, defender against the oppression of Rome. The Romans hated him. Although not many people know his name today, Mithridates was the most formidable opponent to go up against the Romans since Hannibal Barca. This is a lost chapter of the Roman Republic that I think you're going to be thrilled to learn about. Take a look at this map. The pink and purple part is the Kingdom of Pontus. Isn't it huge? It encapsulates almost all of the Black Sea, huge parts of Turkey, Lycia, Lydia, and parts of the Kingdom of Armenia. The territory Mithridates controlled was immense. If things had turned out a little differently, he and his army may have crushed the Romans. Here's another map. Check out the Kingdom of Pontus in the corner, squeezed by Rome and Armenia. This map is from 50 AD, 100 years after Mithridates' death. His whole kingdom was reduced to a small slice of pie and a slave to the Roman Empire. What went wrong? In the beginning, things were going so well. The king fought at the head of the Mithridatic Wars from 89 to 63 BC. He kept winning and winning and winning, right up until he was betrayed by his own son, Pharnaces, who rose up against him. This betrayal led to Pompey the Great winning the war for Rome and Mithridates' untimely demise. He definitely didn't see that coming. You might be wondering right about now what this has to do with lost ancient technology. You might also be wondering what I meant earlier when I called Mithridates the immortal king. Yes, the two things are connected. Mithridates was so afraid of being assassinated by poison that he allegedly made himself immune to all known poisons. This is only a legend, so take it with a grain of salt. The ancient myth says the king dosed himself with small bits of poison to steadily build up his immunity. With help from his best alchemists, he developed a protection against all poisons. His attempt at gaining full immunity from everything is so famous that it has a name. Scientists call it Mithridatism. It's a real technique that people have used for the last 2,000 years to supposedly make themselves invulnerable to every kind of poison. Even Rasputin did it. It's known that the Russian mystic Rasputin survived a poisoning attempt on his life. He allegedly survived because he practiced Mithridatism. Rasputin understood the old ways of protecting one's body from poison. Modern scientists don't believe in the ancient method. Scientists say instead of immunity, Mithridatism only accumulates lethal toxins in the body, ultimately leading to poisoning. But if it worked for Rasputin, couldn't there be something to it? Ancient alarm clocks. What could be more exciting than a lecture on clocks? Don't answer that until you've heard what I have to say first. I want to tell you about the oldest known clock in the world, a water-powered device used to accurately tell the time as early as 1417 BC. Then I'll show you the oldest known alarm system. People had to get up during ancient times too. During the reign of Amenhotep III, a water clock was installed at Karnak Temple. Ancient documentation claims the inventor was a man named Amenemhet. He designed a stone vessel with sloping sides that allowed water to drip out at a constant rate that mimicked the passage of time. Marked pillars easily kept track of the hours and minutes. What was the purpose of such a clock? It was mostly for telling time at night. Things could get a little tricky at night for priests when they needed to know the exact hour for religious rituals. The water clock allowed these priests to offer sacrifices and perform temple rites at the exact right time. But what if you lived in ancient Greece and needed to wake up to go to work at an ungodly time in the morning? The Greeks were fabulous inventors. They took the water clock and improved it. Around the 3rd century BC, Greek engineer Ctesibius took Amenemhet's original design and added a second basin, a water wheel, cogs, and an automatic refill system. This allowed the clock to run 7 days a week, all year, while remaining perfectly accurate for up to 2,000 consecutive years. Then, in the 5th century BC, legendary philosopher Plato came up with the first real alarm clock. Prior to his invention, people had to depend on door knockers. These were people hired to go to your house in the morning and bang on your door to wake you up. If you couldn't afford a door knocker, you could stick a bunch of nails into a candle. Then, when the candle wax burned down a certain amount, the nails would drop and clink onto a loud clay plate. Plato made things much less stressful. He evolved Ctesibius's improved water clock system by altering the overflow vessel to trap air inside. As the trapped water increased, so did the internal pressure. When the pressure became too much, it forced its way out of a valve and made a loud whistle noise, like a kettle. I wonder how many of these water clocks were thrown against the wall in the first few years after Plato made them popular. Do you think they'd come up with a snooze option? Ancient supercapacitor. A group of engineers from MIT have created supercapacitors that can store huge amounts of energy using ancient materials. Their incredible breakthrough is proof that using simple materials that are abundantly available across the globe, people thousands of years ago could have built sophisticated batteries. The team of engineers created their supercapacitor using cement, water, and carbon black. These are 3 ingredients that can be found basically anywhere. Using their device, the engineers were able to store large amounts of energy. Each supercapacitor can house about a day's worth of energy from a solar panel or a windmill. In the future, this method could be used to create low-cost energy storage systems. The MIT researchers said supercapacitors made from cement and carbon black could be incorporated into the concrete foundation of every single house, turning the foundation into a gigantic battery. But what's crazy is that it wouldn't even look like a battery. It would still be a concrete foundation, only it would hold energy. There still isn't any proof that this technology was used by the ancients. However, if you subscribe to the theory that the pyramid was a gigantic battery, discoveries like this benefit your cause. Scientists are only now starting to realize that perfectly natural ingredients can be used in the most sophisticated of technologies. There is no doubt that ancient civilizations could have possessed such knowledge. Forgotten Roman tech in Spain. In 2018, a storm swept across southwest Spain. Cortadura Beach near Cádiz had its sand blown around like nature had unleashed an epic leaf blower from the heavens. When the storm calmed, forgotten structures from the Roman Empire were all over the place. The storm pulled back the sand to show a stone road and pieces of an ancient aqueduct from the 1st century. According to local archaeologist Moises Camacho, he was made aware of the ruins because locals had descended on the beach and were digging them up, looking for treasure, no doubt. Moises and his team shooed away the treasure hunters and secured the area. After an initial investigation, they identified the crumbling stone structure as being the aqueduct of Gades, previously thought lost to the sea. In the 1st century, this amazing piece of Roman engineering brought fresh water across 50 miles of stone canals to the people of Cádiz. Even though it's so old and was destroyed by the endless waves of the coastline, archaeologists were shocked to find pieces still joined together with the original mortar. This is how amazing Roman technology was. Thousands of years old, buried underneath the sand of a beach and beaten senseless by salt water, and still Roman concrete stays solid. Then there's the road. Archaeologists uncovered 2 walls, each one about 6 feet tall. The walls would have run along the ancient road, though it's not clear where it went. Moises and his team think the road was destroyed by a tsunami in 1755. I guess you just never know what you're going to find at the beach. The amazing weapons of Archimedes. Ancient Greek inventor Archimedes came up with a steam cannon that used the power of the sun to fire flaming projectiles. It was one of the most devastating weapons prior to modern artillery. But was this thing real? Or is the flaming steam cannon nothing but an ancient exaggeration? Cesare Rossi from the University of Naples believes the cannon was real, and he's not the only one. In 2006, a group of scientists from MIT recreated the cannon and successfully tested it. Archimedes wasn't only a builder of flaming cannons, he also built a giant claw that could be placed at the edge of a bay to lift ships out of the water. These were supposedly used against the Roman invaders during the siege of Syracuse in the 3rd century BC. It was literally a huge claw, like in one of those arcade claw machines, only this one sank ships. Archimedes also came up with catapults and other wacky war machines. He devised a system of concave mirrors that focused the rays of the sun to create a sort of energy beam. When the beam was pointed at an enemy ship, it exploded in flames. Ancient historian Petrarch confirmed the legend, saying that Archimedes did indeed invent a cannon. Leonardo da Vinci also confirmed the legend. He agreed that Archimedes' cannon used pressurized steam to shoot a projectile out of a barrel. It was like a cannon you'd see on a pirate ship, only it relied on steam. Rossi thinks the legend of the cannon and the mirror-generated death beam are linked. He said the cannon could have been heated using mirrors focusing the sun's light. Hollow projectiles filled with some sort of incendiary fluid like pitch or sulfur could have been loaded into the cannon. When the mirrors heated the weapon enough, the incendiary fluid would ignite, forcing a cannonball from the cannon at tremendous speed. Theoretically, this could have been used to destroy any ships getting within 400 or 500 feet of a coastline. It would have made port cities very easy to defend from naval invasion. But not everyone is convinced that Archimedes was this smart. Serafina Cuomo from the University of London said the evidence isn't there. She said Archimedes is nothing but a quasi-mythical icon. What are your thoughts on these amazing examples of lost technology? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.
The immortal battery. Physics professor at University of Oxford, Robert Walker, acquired a very interesting device in the 1800s. Walker somehow got his hands on a battery, a simplistic device used to push a hanging metal ball back and forth between a pair of small bells. Over 175 years later, the Oxford electric bell is still ringing. It's rung over 10 billion times, and the battery shows no signs of slowing down anytime soon. It's now known as the most durable battery in the world, an immortal source of power. What makes it so fascinating is that this piece of technology is a complete mystery to the experts. Nobody knows how it's functioned for so long, or how long it will continue to work. To find out, experts would have to crack it open, and nobody wants to be the one who ruins the historic battery. What scientists do know is that the battery appears to be made of alternating disks of silver, zinc, sulfur, and some other mysterious materials. When put together, these things generate low currents of electricity. The current is so low that you can barely hear the bell ringing. It's just a delicate kind of vibration between the two bells. It is one of the longest-running science experiments in the world, and even today, nobody has been able to replicate it. Ancient navigation charts. In Micronesia, the Marshall Islands consist of 34 coral atolls. In total, it's over 1,000 tiny islands and islets spread out across a huge area of hundreds of miles of ocean. In order to properly maintain links between all of these small islands and the tiny communities living on them, the ancient islanders built seafaring canoes. These vessels were pretty simple and allowed for the islanders to travel from place to place. But finding their way from one island to another proved to be a bit more difficult. And so they came up with a fascinating piece of technology. They devised specialized charts which could track the locations of these islands along with the wave patterns. Now, these island charts weren't maps drawn on paper. The islanders obviously didn't have the advanced tools and technology that we have today. Instead, they made their charts out of wooden sticks. They put together a kind of rectangular box with thin sticks, with other sticks inside the box running horizontally, vertically, and diagonally. There are even some curved sticks to represent wave swells. The islanders then used tiny shells fastened to the sticks to represent the physical positions of the islands. The biggest map was known as a rebelib, showing a huge piece of the Marshall Islands. In order to train seafarers, they had a chart called the Matang, which was specifically designed for training navigators. Even more interesting is that they didn't simply take these maps with them, they had to memorize them. Still, these rudimentary maps allowed the islanders to make their way around their little part of the world with total ease. Unbreakable Roman glass. Perhaps one of the most famous lost inventions of the ancient world is unbreakable Roman glass. Also known as Roman flexible glass, this invention has been lost to time, and its very existence is technically unconfirmed. But there are many historical accounts that talk about this impressive material, so many historians believe it really did exist. This unbreakable flexible glass could be dropped or thrown and could withstand heavy damage without shattering into a million pieces. The element of flexibility in glass is something that not even modern technology has been able to figure out. The closest invention of modern science is the tempered glass that we now see in phones and all kinds of protective equipment. But unfortunately, nobody knows who invented this spectacular technology. That's because the inventor didn't live long enough to share it with anyone besides the Roman Emperor Tiberius Caesar. The legend goes that the inventor wanted to share his secret invention with the emperor, so he brought him a glass bowl that could not be broken. But the emperor feared such a remarkable creation could cause the sudden and catastrophic depreciation of gold and silver. He looked at it as a new kind of precious metal, which would devalue all the precious metal Rome had in her stockpile. To protect his assets, the emperor ordered his head to be cut off and his secret buried with him. The lost technology of the Egyptians. Up until around the 7th century BC, there wasn't a lot of iron present in Egypt. Iron never really became common until the Assyrians invaded. The Egyptians never liked it because they associated iron with the evil Egyptian deity Seth, who ruled the central deserts of Africa. So what does this have to do with ancient Egyptian technology? The lack of iron is a major issue when it comes to explaining how the ancient Egyptians built so many monumental structures without using iron tools. Their greatest temples, underground tombs, and of course the pyramids were mostly made from solid basalt, granite, and diorite. These are extremely hard stones that are difficult to shape even with iron tools. But according to pretty much all archaeological evidence found at these sites, the only tools the Egyptians had were made of bronze. What I'm trying to say here is that whatever technology was used to create these megalithic structures 4,500 years ago, it almost certainly was not brass chisels and stone hammers. In general, the tool you're using to carve something has to be stronger than that thing. The truth is that we simply don't know what tools the Egyptians used to shape their giant obelisks and perfectly smooth stone blocks. The lost Roman herb. In the days of ancient Rome, there was an herb called silphium. It was a small plant with hardy roots, stumpy leaves, and beautiful yellow flowers. The plant also oozed with sap that the Romans found delicious and extremely useful. By the end of the Roman Empire, the plant was literally worth its weight in gold. Nobody knows how the Romans figured it out, but they managed to come up with an almost endless list of uses for this little herb. They used its stalks in soups, they ate its roots dipped in vinegar, they created perfume, and even used its sap as a garnish for eating flamingo brains. It was a major ingredient in Roman cuisine. It also had medical applications. Its juice was an aphrodisiac in the bedroom, and perhaps most surprisingly, it was used as the first effective form of birth control. The shape of the plant seeds were shaped exactly like a heart, or at least the cartoon version of a heart you send to someone like an emoji. Historians believe it was the silphium seeds which were responsible for that very symbol which we associate with romance to this very day. Sadly, the plant was so important and so popular that it was picked to death. The ancient historian Pliny the Elder wrote that the very last silphium plant was plucked and given to Emperor Nero around the year 54 AD. The Romans miraculously came up with the world solution to pretty much everything, then used it to extinction. Give a big shout out to Carolyn Talon and Mr. Hutch. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the Origins Explained family. The Beijing Ancient Observatory. There are many places on Earth that were once used as observatories, places like Stonehenge and Göbekli Tepe. One of the oldest actual stellar observatories was built a little more recently in the year 1442 by the Ming Dynasty of China. They built it over the bones of a smaller, less advanced observatory that had been established over 200 years earlier in 1227. This observatory was never equipped with telescopes, but they did use some pretty interesting ancient instruments to help with their studies into the sky. They had large cartography tools like an oversized sextant, an azimuth theodolite, and even an armillary sphere. These instruments may sound like a bunch of mumbo-jumbo, and that's because you probably don't use them in your daily life. Me neither. These were ancient tools used to measure stellar distances. It was the best the Chinese could do at the time to actually measure how far a certain celestial body was from the Earth. The Great Wall of Gorgon. The Great Wall of Gorgon was one of the most impressive architectural feats accomplished in the ancient world. It's longer than the Antonine Wall and Hadrian's Wall put together. It was constructed during the latter part of the 5th century and remained occupied for about 200 years by the Sasanian Empire. This isn't exactly the most famous empire in all of history. They were founded in the year 224 AD after the collapse of the Parthian Empire. Their territory stretched across a huge part of the eastern Mediterranean, all the way up to what is now Pakistan. They lived in parts of Central Asia and all the way down to southern Arabia. They are considered by historians to be the last Persian imperial dynasty before the Muslim conquest starting in 633. They were also the peak of ancient Iranian culture, with beautiful works of art, fantastic architectural displays, and impressive fortification technology. The Great Wall of Gorgon was a massive system of defensive lines across their northern border. It was specifically built to protect their domain from the White Huns, also called the Alans. The wall was built from pretty primitive materials, just mud shaped into bricks, and yet it was massive, with a width of over 30 feet lined on one side by a huge earthen bank and a ditch. But this wasn't just a wall. It was an entire blockade of over 38 fortresses spread out across intervals and standardized barracks that housed soldiers. It took an estimated 36,000 soldiers to man this huge barrier and protect the empire. But the wall, sadly, was not enough to protect them from the onslaught of the Muslim army. Within just 5 short years, the entire Sassanid Empire had been defeated and then absorbed into the Islamic Caliphate. The Ziggurat of Ur. The Ziggurat of Ur is a phenomenal architectural invention that was created over 4,100 years ago. It had tiered levels, which probably made it easier to build such a massive structure. Ziggurats can be found all over Iran and Iraq. They were once used for religious rituals and as administrative hubs for the ruling priests and kings of old Mesopotamia. Yet there is none more impressive than the Great Ziggurat of Ur. It was first uncovered in the 1920s, then fully excavated by workers with the Pennsylvania Museum in Philadelphia and the British Museum in London. They uncovered a massive rectangular pyramid oriented directly to true north. There were 3 giant staircases which led from the gate to the first terrace. Then a single staircase going up to the second terrace, and a final staircase going up to the great temple at the top. Amazingly, the whole thing is made of bricks and mud. Plain old mud shaped into bricks, baked to be hard and then stacked one on top of the other. Some of these bricks weighed as much as 33 pounds. The entire bottom portion of the ziggurat took about 720,000 of these bricks to complete. Here's an interesting difference between ziggurats and pyramids. The ziggurats in Mesopotamia were made of mud, which was easy to handle from a primitive technological standpoint, whereas the pyramids were made of wildly hard rock. And so it's not as much about the tools used to make this structure as it is the resources needed to pull it off. It was an incredibly advanced piece of architecture for its time, and built with impressive ingenuity considering a large chunk of it is still standing. Decarbonizing furnace. Archaeologists in China have discovered an ancient decarbonization furnace. This impressive piece of technology dates back to the Warring States period, between 475 and 221 BC. It was discovered inside the ruins of an ancient iron foundry at the archaeological site of the Huduan Wan ruins in Henan province. A decarbonization furnace might not sound like that big of a deal, but it was a pretty remarkable invention almost 2,500 years ago. It was discovered inside a workshop which was used for casting tools and weapons. They also found ceramic products, tools relating to cast iron, and an ordinary firing furnace. If you're not sure what a decarbonization furnace is, I'll quickly explain. In simple terms, it is a specialized furnace used in metallurgy to remove carbon from something like iron. The metal must be heated to a temperature of over 1100 degrees Fahrenheit, and this results in a softening of the metal. It's a key process in making more complicated and longer-lasting metals. And according to modern scientists, this type of iron casting technology wasn't developed until 1947 by British scientists, but the furnace found in China was made over 2,000 years earlier. The chariots of the gods. The cherubim appear numerous times in the Hebrew Bible, but they are never explained in great detail. Most religious interpretations describe the cherubim as a group of guardian angels who act as attendants or literal guards to the divine throne in heaven. In Genesis, it's the cherubim who place the flaming sword at the Garden of Eden to protect the tree of life. While in the Psalms and other parts of the Bible, Yahweh, the name of the Jewish God, is said to ride upon these cherubim. And depending on how you want to interpret the words, these things can either be seen as actual angels or some kind of bizarre flying vehicle. In fact, the idea of the cherubim being flying vehicles isn't even new. In the 2nd century BC, there was a group of Kabbalah mystics who agreed the cherubim were some kind of ancient technology, a chariot which gods used to fly across the sky. King David, the author of the Psalms, even described thousands upon thousands of flying cherubim. It's obviously quite difficult to know for sure what was happening over 2,000 years ago. The prophet Ezekiel, in his great vision, interpreted the cherubim not as vehicles, but as living beings. And if you read his words closely, it sounds kind of like an extraterrestrial encounter, and makes you wonder if the people of the ancient world saw an army of flying machines and just didn't know how to describe them properly. Thanks for watching! Which ancient technology impressed you the most? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye!